Hi, and welcome back to my channel. It's lovely to see you all today, and I hope you're doing well. So, just before we begin, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Penny, and I'm a 17-year-old wheelchair user who has needed a wheelchair for her whole life, but only received one she could use 12 years ago. So by that you can gather that I have been a wheelchair user for 12 years. I have played a considerable role in the disability activist community since that point, and this is why I started the channel, because I want to educate people around disability. So, without further ado, the topic of today's video. So as you will have seen from the title of this, it's a story time about the time I was told I was too pretty to be disabled. As I've just mentioned in the intro, this is going to be a story time about the time I was told I was too pretty to be disabled and the impact that it had on me. Hopefully it goes right this time, because I have tried to film this part of the video 3 times and I keep missing out bits that I believe are key to the video. So hopefully things will go right this time. When this first happened, although it has happened several times since, when it first happened, I think I was 8 and it was around Christmas time. So naturally, my family and I, we went to a couple of Christmas parties to celebrate with those around us and to really meet up with everybody that we don't get to talk to as often. So we turned up to that party fairly early. So early, in fact, I think there was only one other person there, aside from us. And this person was somebody who knew my dad and who knew that my dad did have a disabled child. And as Christmas parties go, as any party really goes, you greet the people you're with. And this person said to me, "Crikey, Penny, you're too pretty to be in a wheelchair. You know that, right?" And I will admit, I didn't bring anything up to him then, and I will admit that I did that because at the time when I was 8, I didn't really have any conception of what the implications of that comment were. I just thought at the time that he was being a bit silly because in my head, as it should have been and as it still is, whether my disability has nothing to do with how pretty I am. My disability is my disability. It has nothing to do with that. But this person clearly did not think so. And today we are going to be delving in to why. So, as many of you will know, beauty standards are unfortunately still a thing. And there is still this rhetoric that certainly went around then, and still goes around today even, that you have to be a certain way, you have to behave a certain way, you have to look a certain way to be beautiful. Disabled people have perpetually been considered as unworthy of fitting these beauty standards because well, for a variety of reasons. Some of the ones that are pertinent to me is that a lot of people think my wheelchair is bulky and ugly, and therefore makes me, the person sitting in it, ugly. So, because like I mentioned, disabled people are seen as lesser because of the fact that they might need a mobility aid or a feeding aid. Unfortunately, this negative view of disabled people is also perpetuated by the media. They paint us to be unable to take care of ourselves and to be unable to be interested in anything beauty related. And because of this, a lot of people believe that because disabled people aren't present in that way in the media, that disabled people in real life cannot be pretty, cannot be interested in fashion, cannot be interested in makeup, cannot be interested in skincare. So when this person said to me that I am too pretty to be disabled, in reality what they were saying is, you are too pretty to fit my idea of disabled, to fit the false idea that I have of disability. And that, once I realised that, it unfortunately reinforced in me that the majority of people think that disability makes a person ugly, and think that disability makes a person lesser. It made me think that the disabled part of myself was abhorrent, which I now realise that it isn't. This story also has cropped up a couple of other times where it has had other implications on me. For example, the one that comes to my head most is using public bathrooms. There have been a multitude of instances where I have used a disabled bathroom and have had somebody waiting outside ready to accuse me that I am not disabled because I am young and and do not look like how they perceive a disabled person looks. And for that reason, I have then been forced to give details of my diagnosis to a random stranger in order to convince them that I needed to use that bathroom. If that does not sound alarming to you, let me explain why. A diagnosis is, for me at least, it's something that I will disclose when I feel comfortable disclosing. So, for example, I am disclosing details of my diagnosis on the internet for the purposes of education, which I feel comfortable with because I want to do it. And 9 times out of 10, I will disclose details of my diagnosis to my friends because I feel comfortable doing that. The only time I don't feel comfortable disclosing details of my diagnosis is when people come up to me before asking my name, before thinking, they say things like either, "What's wrong with you?" or "You don't need a wheelchair." And that is because in those situations I don't feel as though I'm treated like a person. I don't feel like I'm treated with dignity. And by having to disclose my diagnosis when I don't feel comfortable, that it just reinforces the idea that the majority of the society sees disabled people as just their diagnosis and not as a person. I will say that even if it's your first conversation with me, if you ask me my name first, if you make clear that your intention is to get to know me, then 9 times out of 10 in the first conversation I will probably tell you some part of my diagnosis, because I know that you are doing it for reasons that pertain to a growing friendship. However, that's me, and I know a lot of disabled people who don't feel comfortable disclosing their diagnosis to people they just met, and that is also valid because that is this person's choice. When somebody comes up to me after I've just used the toilet to accuse me of not needing it, that is terrible for me, because I feel invalidated and I don't feel like a person, and that is from somebody who is known to willingly disclose their diagnosis to people who are almost perfect strangers. Imagine if you're somebody who is very private about their diagnosis, and if you get ambushed in a pressured environment, imagine how that would make them feel. pretty terrible, right? So, that is why doing that is wrong. Because if you do that, you are not only enforcing your stereotypes onto somebody else, you are telling this person that because of the way they look, because of the way they come off, they do not need something that they do need, and you are therefore forcing this person to disclose private information that they do not need to disclose in order to refute your false claim, which is, as I've said, very wrong. I know that my disability is pretty visible because of my chair, and I know that while there are people who will accuse me of not needing to use a disabled bathroom because although I'm in the chair, I don't look like I would need the chair. I know that I'm in a privileged position because there are a lot of people with completely invisible disabilities that face these sorts of people who accuse them of not being disabled a lot more than I do. Let me make one thing clear. If you do not know the person, whether they're disabled or not is none of your business. Because although you might say that you are asking for this information because you want to make sure that disabled people are stuck up for, regardless of your intention, regardless of whether you intend to stick up for disabled people, that is not what you are doing. You are gatekeeping something that should not be gatekept. You are making somebody feel uncomfortable using a public facility that needs to be used because every person has the right to use a toilet if they need it, and every person has the right to access a toilet that they can use, regardless of whether you think they look like they should use that toilet or not. And even if this person does not look disabled to you, as I've said, invisible illnesses exist, and these people with invisible illnesses should not have to give their information to somebody when they do not feel comfortable and when they are in a high stress situation like being ambushed having just used the toilet. You should not ask somebody who has just used a disabled toilet to validate their use for it, because regardless of whether you want to protect the disabled community, that is not what you're doing. You are asking somebody who perhaps has an invisible illness to give details of their diagnosis to you, a complete stranger, and that is incorrect. There are trans people who feel more comfortable using disabled toilets because they perhaps might not be out yet, and they perhaps would not feel comfortable using a gendered toilet. While some trans individuals might not be disabled, that is the option that they feel safe in at that point in time. Trans people, if they feel comfortable going in a disabled loo, it is my personal opinion that they should be able to, because that is how they feel comfortable, and as I mentioned, every person deserves to be able to go to the toilet. Anyway, goodbye. Have a great day.